Everybody, David McGuffin here. It is July 26, 2022. We're attempting a new method to do Travel Talk Tuesday, and I'm not sure if this is coming through on Zoom at all, or if it's still coming through on Facebook. It appears it's coming through on Facebook. However, you can't see me, I don't guess. So therefore, we're missing the Zoom app. So we're going to continue on live with Facebook, and I will just talk over everything here, and we'll go back this week and readdress it. It's a good thing that I only have a 10-minute item on the Siena's Duomo today, but I don't guess I really need even to look into the camera because things aren't working as they are. But we're talking tonight about Siena, and it's Duomo. Duomo is the cathedral or the main place of worship for the Bishop and Cardinal of Siena. Some of you or Catholics may know a little bit more about that than I do, but Duomo comes from the Latin word domus, meaning the house or the house of God. It has nothing to do with the dome that's on top of a lot of churches in Tuscany. And so I just wanted to give you a little heads up because we're visiting the area of Siena, which is right between the words here of Florence and Volterra. So I'm going to let this play and talk over it. And apparently we're going Facebook Live. And I don't know how to get Facebook Live and my image on there at the moment, but here we go on a Google Earth view going from Florida all the way over to Siena. This is pretty cool animation here. And we go to the very city center, the heart of Siena. This is Il Campo, the main public square, and this is the Duomo of Siena, which was built in the Romanesque and Gothic style. Gosh, it began construction in the 1200s, around 1250 or so, and continues from there.
Siena's cathedral is a masterpiece of Romanesque and Gothic architecture. The architect Giovanni Pisano began work in 1229 and completed the lower half in pure Romanesque medieval style. See the characteristic round arches above the three doors? That is typically a way in which to distinguish Romanesque from Gothic architectural style. Work continued up higher in the Gothic style, with pointy arches, golden inlaid mosaics, tons of statues, and lots of frilly and pointy stonework meant to represent the flickering flames of the Holy Spirit. The cathedral is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Jesus. Notice the golden mosaics at the top of the facade, with Mary, supported by angels, being crowned by Christ as the Queen of Heaven. The dome dried in the church in 1229, and then work began on the bell tower. The bell tower soared upwards to 250 feet and was completed by 1315 in the same artistic style as the church, white with dark green stripes. The church was enlarged in 1315 by having the choir extend farther to the east, extending out over the baptistry, which was tucked away below the Duomo itself. By this time, everything was going well for the Sienese. 70,000 inhabitants lived in the city. There was a great city hall and a public bell tower nearby at Il Campo, and the beautiful Duomo was soaring above the city as well. But just up the road, their arch-rival Florence was in the midst of building an even larger church. The Sienese were green with envy. A plan was devised to enlarge the present Duomo by flipping the whole cross-shaped layout 90 degrees, making the current nave the future transept, or the arms of the cross-shaped structure. When completed, this would give Siena the largest church in all of Europe. Well, unfortunately, it never happened. Work began in 1339 on the walls and facade of the church. Foundations were laid for the pillars to hold up the roof, but then construction stopped. The Black Death, the bubonic plague, hit Europe, and by 1348, Siena had lost 1/3 of its population to the plague, and the remaining 45,000 citizens had no desire to continue the project. But no worries here, because inside the original Duomo, that which we see here right now, there are some of the best works of art in all of Christendom.
So let me talk a little bit about the interior. And boy, I've had a busy week here in Middleburg. Not only is it extremely hot, I'm trying to complete a project outside here for Charlotte, and she and I are working on one of her projects, which we've been going on ever since COVID started. We call it a she shed, but she calls it a she mansion. And hopefully before I head back to Europe on the 20th of August, I'll be able to show you some of the progress and what we're doing. And hopefully she'll get moved into that thing. But I spent way too much time working on that today and didn't have a whole lot of time to do Travel Talk Tuesday. So I've got an abbreviated segment here tonight on this Duomo in Siena. And I've got a lot of content to show you, but I'm going to just show you two things inside. Let's see if I can get back here. Okay, let's see. So that's sitting there. That's that.
Now let's turn our attention to the Duomo's interior. Gosh, this nave, it is impressive. Zebra stripe columns seemingly rise forever upward to the ceiling. The blue and gold ceiling artwork pops out and illuminates the ceiling and pointing our eyes to the altar in the far distance. Now take a look up at the ceiling. Find those rows of 172 heads peering down at the floor. These are supposed to depict the 172 popes who reigned from the time of St. Peter until the present, or at least the 12th century present, which is when the church was built. It's hard to see way up there, but with a closer inspection, you'll see that the same four faces are repeated over and over again. I guess no one at the time really knew what all those popes looked like back 1,200 years ago. Now let's take a look down at the floor. Several times a year, usually in the spring and fall, the Duomo floors are uncovered to reveal wonderfully detailed mosaics. From the center entrance door, find the second mosaic panel on the floor. The she-wolf suckling Romulus and Remus is a classic symbol of Siena. Notice that the she-wolf, Siena, depicting Siena, is at the center of the universe, with rival Tuscan cities circling the outside. Look, you can see Pisa depicted as a rabbit, and Florence as a roaring lion, yet Rome is a lumbering elephant. These floor mosaics began in the 13th century and are made of marble, all various colors chosen for the pictorial content. Some 40 different artists over a period of 200 years labored intently on these mosaics.
Now, there's a lot to see inside this cathedral. Over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been in there almost every time I visited Siena, and something has been covered up and under renovation or cleaning, I guess I should say. So we're going to look at two elements in addition to the mosaics, which I've just shown you. These mosaics are unlike any other place of worship that I've ever been in. I've been in some places that have mosaics. For example, the Basilica St. Mark's in Venice, that have tiny, tiny little chiclets, chiclet size pieces of different material, whether it be granite or gold or whatever, that make up the entire mosaic structure of that basilica there in St. Mark's Cathedral. That's on the floors, walls, and everything else. These particular mosaics here in Siena, you can see, let me, if I can back up just a second. You can see that they're inlaid with not tiny little chiclets, but larger pieces like the red area and these areas. And then if we could zoom in to the she-wolf here, you would see those are small, tiny little chicklets. They create the shadows and everything else, and Romulus and Remus down there as well. So those are just unique in all of Christendom. And those artists who over 200 years installed all of these mosaics in the floors are very well recognized, except we don't really know their names. I mean, their names are known, but we as common people do not know their names because they don't stand out like someone like Michelangelo, who we're going to talk about in just a moment. Now, you see the she-wolf. This is a female wolf with tits, and the she-wolf is raising, suckling Romulus and Remus. Let me go to this next image right here. This is an image of that I took in Siena, and there are thousands of these images all over Siena. There's hundreds all over Rome. Now, how in the heck does Rome and Siena have the same type of imagery? Well, let's start with Rome. So the legend goes that way back in the day, these two young kids were abandoned by their mother, and in this area that we now know in central Italy, and that a wolf, a female wolf, found them, took them as her own, and nurtured them until they could grow up and live on their own by using her milk to help nourish them. So the she-wolf with the two little twins, Romulus and Remus, suckling on the tits there underneath, is a symbol that you see all over Rome. And the legend goes that Romulus and Remus showed up, the she-wolf raised them. What happened next was that there's 7 hills in Rome, and Romulus chose one, Remus chose one, and it so happened that the hill that Romulus chose was the best hill, had the best area in soil for crops to grow, and was the highest hill with the best lookout, and more defensible than other places. And Remus got very jealous, and he came to Romulus and was not happy with this at all. And they got into a fierce fight on top of that hill, and Romulus right there killed and murdered his brother Remus. Well, Remus had a son, and his name was Siena, and his son saw that his dad was killed. Romulus was totally in control of the new city of Rome. So Siena hightailed it to the north up the peninsula until he felt he got far enough away to another hill that was he thought was similar to the hill that he had abandoned down in Rome, and he settled there. And he named the city after himself, Siena, which became Siena. And since Siena was depicting the type of soil and the type of material that was available on the ground, we've developed the name Siena as a color now to depict that as well. I hope you're following me. But anyway, Siena settled on that hill, named it Siena, and that's how Siena got its name. And that's why this she-wolf suckling the twins, Romulus and Remus, abounds all over Siena as well. So don't get confused. Rome and Siena have both of those symbols. They both share those symbols, one for one brother, one for the other. Okay, that's the story of Romulus and Remus, at least is all I can remember to tell you at the moment. Let me let this thing run a minute. And hey, here's a quiz. Right behind it, you see those arches? You remember I talked about Romanesque arches are rounded? These are Gothic arches behind there, and they are pointed arches.
Chosen for the picture.
Let me go back to it. See them right there? Pointed arches. Now, the next picture up is just something I came across the last time. I've walked past this many, many times in my walking in Siena, but this is a dentist's office from back in the Middle Ages. This particular dentist is Umberto Gregory, I think. And look at it. He's got Romulus and Remus, and Remus is pulling Romulus's tooth. So they're having a play on the she-wolf and the two twins. But I've never seen that, and someone pointed that out to me as we walked by just last couple months ago. Okay, back inside the Duomo of Siena. This is the Piccolomini altar. Now, Piccolomini is the last name of an important family in Siena, and several of those, they became very important people in the church. In fact, two of the Piccolomini family men became cardinals right there in Siena. And this particular one altar here was built by Cardinal Francesco Piccolomini. And it was constructed in, the middle 1400s. And it was going to be the tomb for this cardinal. This thing is 3 stories high, massive, massive tomb. And you can see it doesn't even reach to the ceiling of the basilica or the Duomo there in Siena. But it's huge, and it has 40 some odd little niches in it that we're going to cover scenes from the life of Cardinal Piccolomini, and it would ultimately be his tomb. Well, the problem is, or maybe that's not a problem at all, but he eventually became Pope Pius II. And the Pope is no longer going to come back and be buried in his humble little town of Siena. He's now buried in the Vatican and with his own little tomb there. So this tomb, this big altar fell out of use. So 50 years later, in 1501, the people in Siena and the people of the church in Siena said, we need to do something with this. So they engaged a young 25-year-old sculptor named Michelangelo to come and carve 41 different little statues to go in these niches. And they're not really little, they're 8 feet tall or so. Well, Michelangelo was well known as being someone who would accept some funds for the project, but never kind of put everything off and procrastinate and never complete it. So he only completed one statue there in this niche. And this was a statue of St. Paul, and you can see it here. And if we could compare those with some of there's at least 4 other ones that we think that some of Michelangelo's apprentice chiseled out and put up there. But if you can compare this with the other ones, all the other ones pale in comparison. And this is St. Paul. Let me check my notes here. Yeah, St. Paul. And I think I've got a close-up coming here, because you can see some characteristic things that Michelangelo would include. Number one, I don't know if you can see, I have a little, can you see his eyes? Perfect. You can see his eyes. Those eyes are characteristic themes. And this eyes that are there are the eyes that Michelangelo used in the statue of Moses that is now sitting in St. Peter's in chains in Rome, but Moses was intended for the tomb of another pope at the time, who was the one who patronized him to come and paint the Sistine Chapel. You can also see Michelangelo, the nose of St. Paul here. You can see the nose of St. Paul is broken, kind of like mine too. I broke my nose when I was a kid, and it's not quite as chiseled as this one here, but this is a self-portrait nose that Michelangelo used in many of the statues that he sculpted, because it was a self-portrait of his face, his nose on that. And then finally, you can see the hand, his right hand hanging down here, very much resembles the right hand of the statue of David that Michelangelo sculpted right before David was looking at Goliath, ready to throw his slingshot around. And that's in the Accademia there in Florence. So all of those characteristics were included here in this sculpture of Michelangelo in the Siena Duomo. One last thing. This is me standing underneath the dome just a couple of months ago. And this dome is 12-sided dome. It was built in the middle 1200s, so about 100 years before that great dome that Brunelleschi built up in Florence. You know, the one that I told you about earlier, that the Sienese were jealous about that cathedral coming up at the same time they were trying to expand theirs. But Brunelleschi, Filippo Brunelleschi, built this true dome that was rounded. This particular dome is 8 or 12-sided. So not a true dome. So there are 12 side panels that are all going up, and the dome is actually very, very short. But because of an optical illusion of, here's a great picture of it, an optical illusion of these panels being painted like a coffered ceiling, it makes it appear with, by the way, these are not coffered ceilings, so there's no depth to it at all. It's just painted on to look like there is depth. So it's a trick of the eye. And each one of those squares, each row up is smaller and smaller and smaller. So a dome that is really only about 20 feet tall looks like it soars way up to the heavens. And this is a way that they were able to, the architect of the dome was able to do that and use it so it's not truly a rounded dome, but a 12-sided geometric figure, actually, is what it is, with a cupola on top. Okay, there's a lot more to see inside this cathedral, this basilica, this Duomo, all three synonyms, but I ran out of time in my creativity this afternoon. And so I'm letting Travel Talk Tuesday run to the end. And I'll be back with you next week, because I want to finish this Duomo up, and I've got a lot of content that we took. I'm just having a little difficulty pulling everything together. But listen, thank you guys for joining me tonight. We'll be back next week, 7:30 next Tuesday night for Travel Talk Tuesday. Thanks again for joining me and putting up with the troubles at the beginning. See you later.